At 6 o'clock, we'll call the meeting to order. This time we'll open the meeting up to citizens' comments. Any citizens wishing to speak? Any citizens wishing to speak? Any citizens wishing to speak? Seeing none? Close citizens' comments. Reports from the chair, I have none. Reports from the committee. Does the committee have any reports? Seeing none, we'll move on. Approval of the minutes, March 13th, 2025, joint meeting with Public Works and regular finance admin meeting.
I move the March 13th joint meeting minutes.
Moved by Vice Chair Gashke, seconded by Supervisor Gearston. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Chris, you're up. Number 6, Public Works Facilities. Resolution to approve an agreement between Kenosha County and Kenosha County Snowmobile Club Alliance for trail grant distribution.
Good evening, everyone. So yes, resolution for the agreement between Kenosha County and the Snowmobile Club Alliance. Kenosha County currently has 71.2 miles of public snowmobile trails that are maintained by the Snowmobile Club Alliance. And where Kenosha County wants to retain the same number of miles on the trail system for 25 and 26 winter season. The Kenosha County Snowmobile Trail is eligible for 100% reimbursable funds, which maintain maintenance, acquisition, insurance, developmental costs. What Kenosha County essentially serves as is a pass-through from the DNR to the club or the residents on the trail for any maintenance costs that they do. Essentially, Kenosha County just donates a few hours of admin time for cutting checks and things of that sort. So we're just looking for approval on behalf of the county board.
Supervisor Gearston.
Move approval of the resolution.
Been moved by Supervisor Gearston, seconded by Supervisor Kirby. Any questions from the committee? Wait, this is a pass through, but other than the admin time, we don't really do anything on this?
Nope.
Okay. Have we had any problems with this arrangement in the past? No. Okay. All right. Seeing no other questions, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Number 7, Sheriff, resolution to approve the 2025 Wisconsin Victim Witness Programs WVWP grant.
It's not
Xavier?
Yeah,
Not Sheriff?
No, it's the DA's office. So this is the grant for furniture in the victim witness room that we have in the courthouse. The courthouse that room is in the courthouse. It's in the basement. It's used for victims who are testifying during trial. So instead of them sitting around outside the courtroom or inside the courtroom, the room in the basement is where we it's a comfort room where they hang out or where they're at. It's mostly for children that usually go down there. It's $1,000. It's to update the furniture. So it's usually basically what it is, I guess.
Supervisor Gearston. Moved by Supervisor Gearston, seconded by Supervisor Vice Chair Gashke. Any questions or comments? What furniture are you replacing, by the way?
My understanding is some of the couches that are gonna get replaced.
Okay.
I believe there's a TV down there, but it's very rarely used, but it's going to be couches and some of the sofas that they sit on. So.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bring up our chairs. Forward. Check them. Number 8, County Tax Group, CTG, report on tax deed eligible parcel. What? Not being taken for foreclosure, Terry. John?
Well, it's me. Good evening,
Terry, you can.
Community Youth and Governance, everyone. John Moyer. I'm here pursuant to the ordinance that we passed recently for the with the finance committee is overseeing, tax, some of the tax deed, properties, and in this case, those that we are not taking for tax deed. There's various reasons I submitted with Terry Jacobson's help, because she put this list together, those parcels that we are not taking. And I believe there are 54 parcels listed. And there's pretty good explanation, to the right there as far as why we're not taking them, but let me just go over a few categories. For example, the biggest group is the payment plan group. There are properties that are tax delinquent for the 20s or 21s, which is what makes them eligible now for a tax deed. And some of those some of those property owners have entered into a payment plan, which is allowed in order to catch up basically and make up for their delinquent taxes. So those that are in a payment plan and are currently paying and aren't, falling behind or haven't violated the payment plan, we don't pursue those. Another category are contaminated properties. And as many of you know, we don't usually take a contaminated parcel unless we have some kind of an end game, unless we have some kind of a plan. Usually that involves, working with the municipality and getting some agreement that we're not going to be left with some contaminated parcel with liability without a plan for remediation, and usually a handoff to the municipality for some reason or some use. So there's a few of those on here, some of which are repeated in the list because they're the same parcel, but they're under different ownership names. Another category, bankruptcy. If a parcel is in bankruptcy, we cannot touch it. It's given protections under the bankruptcy laws. So there's a few of those in there. There are outlots, and again, like the contaminated parcels, we don't normally take an outlot, and by that, many of you already know this, but there might be retention ponds in a subdivision that was, developer put together a plan, and one of the lots is like it collects all the water. It's low or what have you, retention pond. Other times they're set aside for maybe they want to put in like some trails or just leave a natural green space in the development. We don't usually take those unless, again, we have an end game, we have a plan. And again, those plans often contemplate transfer to a municipality. Why? Because we cannot, as a county, assess for special assessments if there is a need, for example, cleaning up the retention pond, it gets polluted, or algae or something like that, or also trees that fall or hazards that develop. However, smaller subdivisions, cities, towns, and villages can do that under the statute. They can put a special assessment and put it against the properties in the development who are actually benefiting from the purpose of the outlet, whether it be retention or beauty or green space. So we don't have, on these ones that are listed here, we don't have an end game yet. There are many of them that we are in discussion with, for example, the city taking a retention pond, or I'm not sure that we have. I've contacted we've met with Wheatland, town of Wheatland recently, Andy Bueller and I, to discuss taking over those last three listed here, having Wheatland take those over. So that's in the works, and an MOU has been drafted, and we're trying to proceed on that. There are a couple that are railroad right of ways. We're not taking those because what would we do with them? And railroads, those delinquencies are primarily special assessments. They don't get property taxes due to exemption, I believe. But they have special assessments, so they're delinquent on that. I've sent letters to the railroads to say that we believe there's a special assessment from, for example, with the Sioux line there, that's in the city. So, please let me know if you think there's a basis for an exemption from the special assessment. We should communicate that to the city or whatever municipality it lies in. I haven't heard back yet. But anyway, I think that covers, there's some that are common wells. Same thing, we need some kind of a plan on those. They're usually very small parcels. We're in the middle of more of a rural area. They have a well on a small piece of the development, and it services many people, or at least historically it did. So those, I'm also working on some letters to some of those owners, to try and figure out, whether the well is still a shared well or what's going on with it. In other words, I think all of these have reasons why, we're not taking them, but it is the obligation of the county tax group to let you know that we're not taking these and why. So that's the report. Any questions?
Supervisor Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through the chair to Fourth Council. So we still issue tax bills on all of these parcels, is that correct?
Well, not on the railroad ones because we don't issue those, but I mean, yes, we still issue tax bills and we do take tax certificates when they're not paid.
Is it possible to learn how many, because this list doesn't look bad. I mean, this stuff, I've seen it worse. I don't know. Patty, you've seen this list worse than this, right?
I've seen it worse.
Yeah. Now, but it would be interesting to know how much we have to eat every year, and this is the whole list, right?
It is.
And so would it be possible to learn how many tax bills were issued for these parcels in the last tax cycle?
If it would, I can buy that. I don't have it at my
Right.
hand today, but in other words, you would like to know like how many bills remain outstanding?
What the total tax in the last tax cycle, just the last one, how many taxes we're issuing that we know we'll never collect?
And by that, do you mean all the prior years of delinquency or just the?
Just the one, so we have a gauge for the year, but if you want to get them all, that's okay, but
Okay, because obviously, the older the tax certificate, the more there's interest and penalties. And
Yeah.
things like that.
I get that.
Okay, so yes, we can put together that information and provide it to them.
And then, one other question, if it's okay. The, harbor wall, is that tied into the major project that you see in the harbor there?
If it's tied in, I can tell you that, if you look that one up, there's actually, there's a parcel that runs exactly parallel to that, that walkway that is the actual wall along the harbor. The particular parcel here is actually a triangular parcel that is out from that. And it's like by that parking lot where the trolley runs by.
Oh,
So that's where it is. I don't know if it's part of.
that's a different spot then.
Yeah, that's the one that's not paid and, again, we're trying to have a conversation with the city on that one. I think what most of the indebtedness there is, again, city special, so it's city, that's owed the money on that one. And that's an aberration, that's an unusual one.
Thank you. That answers my question.
How often do you report this for this group on these?
Once a year in the
Once a
spring,
year.
that's what it says in the ordinance, yeah. I want to mention, I also didn't say, I am currently working on the next list of in-run tax takings. I have 63, but we're adding potentially 2 or 3 more. So that's what we're doing in terms of, taking tax deeds in the calendar year. We've got a list that, as we do every year, that's how many we have.
So that's our total number is that?
That's
What's
what,
our total number? Or these are the ones you're taking now?
yeah, the ones we're taking now are 63 to 66 or 67. We just got a couple that are trickling in, but I'm hoping to file an action before the month of April runs.
Okay. Patty?
I just would remind the committee that with your packet, there is a report from the treasurer every month with the amount of the tax delinquencies, how many parcels, where they're at in the process. So that doesn't answer Dave's specific question on those 54, but it might answer your holistic question.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay.
All right, thank you. I'll try to get
Can
that
I,
list.
can I have a motion to receive and file?
So move.
Been moved by Supervisor Gearston, seconded by Supervisor Kirby to receive and file this report. Thank you, John. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Human Services Lake Behavioral Health Update.
Chairman, Supervisors, Youth and Governments, Carrie Foss. I'm the Director of Behavioral Health Services and asked to come here to speak about Lake Behavioral Hospital. So I'm gonna hand out some information. Lake Behavioral Hospital is just one piece of the larger inpatient hospitalization program. So in this handout, I will direct you to this side of the handout with the three circles on the bottom. So when we talk about Lake Behavioral Hospital, I'll go to the bottom right-hand corner. In 2022, 85% of all of our Chapter 51s went to either Winnebago or Mendota, 36% going to private hospitals. In 2023, we brought on Lake Behavioral Hospital as a contracted provider. We also changed policy within our Chapter 51 and 34, which is crisis, that mandated that only crisis could make referrals to the state hospital. So you see that number changing in 2023 from 85% going to the mental health institutes to 60%. Now I take you to 2024, that number has gone even, has shrunk even more to now only 43%. You go up to the chart above, you will see where individuals are going. You can see that number, that top graph, Winnebago going from 200 in 2022 to 83 in 2024. Then you can see the number of Lake in 2022, none, then 23, then 67. So you can see that bringing Lake in has really moved the needle for our community to use the least restrictive services available. Now, when you flip to the other side, this is our Q1 report. So this is what's happened with hospitalizations from January to March 31st. And I will call your attention to Winnebago. 9 individuals have gone to Winnebago. 22% of our Chapter 51s in the first quarter have gone to the state hospital. So bringing on Lake has made a huge difference in the type of services our community is receiving. There's a lot of other data there, other points of data on this sheet that I want to call your attention to. The top says total admissions. There's been 42 admissions to hospitals for the first quarter. Now I'll go to the bottom left-hand corner of this page. There have been 132 admissions to the care center, which means that we have diverted those many hospitalizations, or we've been able to get people from inpatient to the care center to lessen their length of stay, and stabilization can continue at the care center. Any questions?
Yeah, do you have with these pie charts getting better? I love human services graphs, by the way. They're always top notch with these color grid. They think they're gonna woo my eyes to not asking the real. How much finance do you think? How much financial savings do you think we have here?
I'm looking.
Approximately, I'm not gonna.
I thought Tammy was gonna be here and I thought she might have that. I do
Okay.
know.
Well, I can do you one better. Instead of thinking what we're saving, I can give you actuals on what we're saving, and I can work with Tammy Capito to put that together.
I would love that.
Yeah, I will say, and I think that is really important for the finance committee to be aware that as more need is out there, as we are seeing more people come into the community, as our community is growing, we are looking at how to make accessible, how to make applying for Medicaid as accessible as possible. And so we are continuing to measure how many folks we're serving with insurance and without insurance. So certainly when a Chapter 51 occurs and someone doesn't have insurance or Medicaid, that increases the cost. So there's a lot of variables in that cost, and I think an analysis would be great and best served with
Yeah, that's really
Tammy.
what I'd be in finance. I want to know what that number approximately is. And it's probably a moving target, but I think this is one of the county's crowning achievements. I'm very proud of this. Very proud of this. I think this has been a massive help to the county and to our constituents and the people who need the service.
Absolutely.
So it's just great. So, but when I bring you in here, I want to hear these numbers of where we're the diversions and that type of thing, because this is all great. And then I want to know where the finances are. So if you could do that, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely, and we can certainly get that together and make sure you get it to the chair and the chair can send it to the committee. But I would agree, I'm incredibly proud of this, not only on what the board has supported behavioral health to be able to do, but the folks executing all of this from crisis to our care center staff. There's a lot of work that goes into these numbers.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? I didn't mean to cut you off. Were you done?
Yes,
Okay. All right, well, this is a great report. I love to hear this and I look forward to the financial.
all right,
You have-
thank you.
No, I, okay, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Number 10, finance. Resolution authorizing the defederalization of the United States Economic Development Administration, EDA, EDA, whatever, revolving loan fund and that Kenosha Area Business Alliance, CABA, is that right? Continue operating the revolving loan fund. This is something we've been working on for a couple of years, right, Brock?
Yes.
Okay, all yours.
I mean,
All yours.
let me pick it up. Okay, yeah, so, this is something, yes, Supervisor Gaines, that we have been, kicking around with the EDA here for a few years. It's you have the information in front of you. Kind of brief history, Kenosha County received, two separate EDA awards, one in 1987, one in 1990 to administer as a revolving loan fund program. CABA began administering those funds on behalf of Kenosha County, I think in 1994. What this resolution here is asking for is to support the request to defederalize these funds with the EDA. What that does is it eases a lot of the administration and reporting requirements, both on the CABA side, but then also on the borrower side. So sometimes there's additional reporting requirements and administrative documentation, reporting from the borrower. So this kind of just, I would say, generally makes it much easier and a little bit more attractive to administer in like the traditional revolving loan fund capacity. As far as this committee or Kenosha County is concerned, like I really say that like there's no changes. Like CABA will continue to administer this program in accordance with the revolving loan fund program. We would still continue, we would keep the funds segregated because the EDA still reserves the right to request documentation on how the funds have been used and make sure that they are still being used in accordance with that plan and carry out one or more of the activities by PWEDA, which is the Public Works and Economic Development Act of 1965. So we continue to administer it as is with a few less restrictions. We continue to report it to the county as is. And it could, I would say it could allow for some additional flexibility down the road. But we would, any of that outside of the plan, we would still come to this committee for a resolution to administer those funds outside of that plan. And we would still get the okay from EDA as well, because we wouldn't want them to come in and say, hey, this isn't this doesn't fit the need of that PWEDA Act.
So if you're keeping the documentation and they can come to you for that documentation, is that the way it always was, or were we supposed to have that documentation in the past? You always had it?
It has all the documentation. Yeah, we have, there's a number of reporting requirements, some semi-annual, some annual. This is also federal dollars, so it's part of the single audit
that was just audited this year. We have to have all that documentation on hand or we get dinged from a compliance standpoint.
Okay, so I mean, so there's no difference in who should have the paperwork, who's legally responsible, who's liable, who's all that. Nothing changes other than they're more flexible guidelines and it's easier to do business. I love that. Okay. Anything else, Brock?
I don't think so.
Any questions from the committee? Supervisor Gearston?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through the chair to Brock, what's the dollar balance of the,
Today, the total capital base in this EDA program is about $3.7 million.
3.7?
That's cash and outstanding, current active notes receivable.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Any motion from the committee?
I move to approve.
Moved by Supervisor Kirby, seconded by Supervisor Gearston to approve the resolution. All those in favor, any questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Pass, any noes? Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Eleven, Finance Division, Resolution 2024-25 carryover and annual closeout.
Okay. Well, just to set the table and kind of put this in context for those that may have not gone through this resolution. This resolution is always done in April of the year. This is the first step of closing the books and preparing the final financial statements for the county. The next step after this would be to have the auditors come in May and then working through that process and then getting it finalized audit. But this is important from the standpoint that we take care of any carryovers. So these would be funds that the administration is requesting to take from the balances of the 2024 closeout to carry it over into the 2025 budget year. And that's why it's important to close the books as part of this process. As far as carryovers, there's a number of different types of carryovers. There are automatic carryovers, meaning that, let's say for capital expenditure purposes, projects that have been approved, those are automatically carried over if those projects are not completed. There are also other items and balances that have special budget resolution language that allows for those to be automatically carried over. But then there are other carryovers that require approval from either the county board or either the finance committee or both the finance committee and the county board. So as I go through those, we have those separated. There are some that only require finance committee review and approval, and then some that require both. So that's setting the table. So beginning on page 1, 2, 3, and 4 is the language that we're all accustomed to. So the process that I'll do is similar to how we do the annual budget resolution. I'll point out the whereas specific to an item, and then point out the corresponding further resolved language. And then I'll refer to any supporting documentation that is contained in the rest of the packet. Starting with page 1, the first couple whereases just has the in standard language having to do with the carryovers that we'll go over in detail in a little bit. So the third and the fourth whereas has to do with the surplus that was generated in Brookside. On page 3, the third from the bottom is that we get further resolved. What we're requesting is the county board approve the reduction of the non-current liability in the amount of $788,000. So I'll refer you to the final general fund report on page 7. So that way you can see in the context of how this affects the final general fund report. So what we're requesting is because of the material surplus that was generated by Brookside and Willowbrook's operations this year, We're requesting that a portion of that surplus be used to reduce the non-current, or it's the new language, it used to be a long-term liability. And as a result of reducing that, amount flows into the general fund, and that is that first box at the top of the page there, at 788,000. That's how it ultimately affects the general fund. What I'll do after each one of these is just pause if there's any questions, and if I don't hear any, then I'll move on to the next one.
How much is in that account?
In the non-current, it had 2.28 million. And so this would be reducing that by 788,000, so it would leave 1.5 million in that non-current liability.
Okay,
So, and that depending on what 2025 brings, so if we do have another year similar to this year, we'd be able to potentially reduce not only the short-term liability and potentially that long-term liability in one fell swoop.
what is this 788 for?
That's the
Okay,
long-
and that's the long term that they agreed that we were gonna take from payoff to the county before we leave that in there per our conversation. Is that right?
In 2018, when the project completed, the components of what was owed to the county became non-current. Mostly related to some capital that had been, some capital items that had been done in the construction that hadn't been bonded for. So that represents the 2.288, and this is a portion of that frequency into the fund.
And we're never gonna get to the point where we're reducing them with their flexibility. I mean, I asked the same thing about golf too, and we'll talk about that in the future too, when we get to it, but I mean, this 788 isn't gonna prove to be a hardship to them in how they're doing business or what they might need at the end or anything like that, right?
Oh, no, this is like a first step into bringing all that back into alignment. They were separated from the county, from the standpoint of lapsing into the general fund. And in 2016, was it? 2016. So this would be, one step in clearing the decks.
Yeah, a lot of these questions I've already talked to Patty about, but I want you to hear them so that with the newer members, you're understanding. And if you have any questions about how these funds are there, why they're there, what they're used for, that type of thing, feel free to ask. There's no dumb question on this committee. So I just wanted to kind of get you to elaborate on that a little bit. So
Sure.
if there are none, continue, please.
Okay, so let's continue on page 1. The second, let's see, the fifth and sixth whereas, so kind of dovetailing with the 788,000 there. Over the years, there had been capital projects to replace flooring at Brookside as using reserves as part of that. The be it further resolved is on page 3, the second one from the bottom. So the request here is to take 445,000 of the surplus and put it towards this capital project. Not only for the flooring, but also a windowsill capital project. So the thought process there is, as those rooms are being done, those flooring being replaced, it makes sense if the patients are being moved to then also do the windowsill projects at the same time, so you're not having to move it twice. The budget mod that shows that is part of the overall packet that would be approved if the overall package is shown, and that's on page 11. Thank you, Betty. So with the approval of this, that would authorize 445,000 for that capital project. There are no questions. I'll move on to the next one. For the next one, takes the last whereas on page 1. And the top 3 whereases. So this has to do with a request to use $12,000 of reserves toward increased police presence the form of overtime for some traffic limit enforcement. So in the documents that were sent out, the highway that was listed showed from State Highway 32 to 158. That should have read State Highway 195. So that's on me. So it's the old KR, the Carthage, basically. And that's in the Village of Summers. The $12,000 would then be kind of dovetailed with the Village of Summers purchasing these type of moving radar units. And with that, so a little back history on this, the Department of Transportation had recommended that section of road be reduced from a 4-lane highway that is now to a 2-lane. And with multiple supervisors and the county's efforts, we've tried to stave that off and reduce the speed limit from that same area. And as a result of the DOT doing a speed test to make sure that the speeds have been reduced, their test, we didn't pass the test, so this would go towards making sure that we comply in reducing the speed at that point. So the be it further resolved will be requesting that 12,000 of reserves be applied to that. It's on the bottom of page 3, the last one. That would, the budget modification would be on page 12. That shows the 12,000.
Okay, at this time, I'm gonna allow, we can make an amendment. Supervisor Gearston.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to change the 158 on page 1, State Highway 158 to State Highway 195.
Second.
It's been moved by Supervisor Gearston, seconded by Supervisor Gashby. Any committee comments or questions on that? This was an issue that Supervisor Morrissey alerted me to earlier in the day. So do you have any questions or comments on that, Supervisor Morrissey?
I do. So on the 12,000, I don't know why we would take any money out of reserves to do this. Again, when we get to the sheriff's budget, there's certainly significant issues there already in their overtime. To the tune of a couple $1 million. But again, just so I understand what Varna said here. So I know that I talked to President Stoner, they bought these radar units. Is this kind of like we're gonna give them 12,000 because they paid the radar units? I guess why are we even authorizing overtime to do this? I understand the whole speed study and, the trying to go down to 2 lanes, and I understand the whole thing, which again, I think is a terrible idea by DOT to go down to the 2 lanes, which I don't know that they're gonna do, but makes no sense to me, the stage of the game that we're gonna take $12,000 out of reserves for special traffic enforcement. They have their 4 deputies or whatever it is out there, should be part of their contract as far as I'm concerned. So I guess I just want to clarify your statement there of why we're doing the 12,000 and the fact that they purchased these radars. The rest of my questions clearly were answered because it's not in the city, and just so everybody knows, the sheriff's department is welcome to come to the city and write traffic tickets. We'll take all the traffic enforcement assistance that we can get, but I certainly wouldn't be requesting any kind of overtime for them to do that. Thank you.
Sure. Varna, the 12,000, what are your?
Sure. So
He's asking a question,
Yeah.
so let's answer it.
So what I would say to that is the 12,000 is looked at as kind of a collaboration along with the Village of Summers, their purchase of their moving radar. So between those two, and this 12,000 would fund targeted having 2 deputies spend 2-hour shifts there, between 16 and 20 different times during the year to do this. You're right, they're contracting with the county for sheriff deputy, but so this would be in addition to that. As you know, Village of Summers, lots of area, and so this would be concentrating for this specific purpose.
I can
Supervisor
comment
Houston.
too. I mean, that's my district, District 15. And I agree with the city administrator that it would be a terrible move to go from 4 lanes to the 2 lanes with the twiddle lane. And, but the village of Summers and the city of Kenosha and meetings I've been in agree also very strongly that it should stay the profile that it is at. I've been at meetings where the city staff were present and the village of Summers staff were present. And this is a way of helping us comply with the state study that they're doing, because that state study is what will drive their decision to require it go from the 4 lanes to the 2 lanes. So it's really, it's a state highway. If a state highway anywhere in the county were facing this kind of adversity, the county would step in and try to help to the degree it could. And this would help maintain the 4-lane profile, which I remember some discussion that it might go further south in meetings that I was in. And it's one of the things we talked about is penny wise, pound foolish. I mean, we're spending 12,000. If it helps us pass that study, the villages said that this would increase their cost to maintain the side roads and other costs that they have. So, you know, this one-time cost would help reduce that cost of that government too. So, and there's a lot more that could be said about this. It's just kind of the tip of the iceberg, but it seems like a good move for the whole community to keep this main corridor, which is a major transportation corridor, the furthest one east, as a 4-lane profile to keep the traffic moving. So, especially with all the development that's happening in Racine and Kenosha at both ends of this road. So that's the tip of the iceberg of this thing. I've got a pretty thick file on it at home. So, okay.
Supervisor Kirby.
Through the chair to, Brenda and Patty or whoever else can answer this. What would be the potential financial impact if we didn't approve the $12,000 in overtime?
I would say it would certainly be more than the 12,000 that we put toward it. I mean, that's for the reasons that Supervisor Gertzen laid out. Those costs would certainly exceed this 12,000. Is this a guarantee necessarily that we'll pass that test? But I think it certainly is a good faith effort to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments regarding the amendment? And from you, Supervisor Morrissey?
No, again, I think we're just in the wrong area here to start taking out of reserves for special pet projects, and I just don't think that's where we should go. Thank you.
Seeing no other committee comments, all in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
So we'll carry on and then we can approve it at the end as amended.
Okay. So back to page 2, the fourth, 5th, and 6th whereas. This all has to do with the use of the health insurance reserve. So there's the history on that. In the year 2003, $1 million was put aside in the health insurance reserve. And then 500,000 was added to that in 2005. That reserve was set up there to assist in a year in which there was a large deficit in the health insurance, in which no other surpluses were available to offset it. I'll refer you to, let's go first to the history. Go to page 8. So I like to put this page in every year to illustrate where health insurance ended up for the year. As you can see, we're ending the year at 2.3 million deficit, and that's including this $500,000 draw of reserves to reduce that amount. If you look back in year 2016, that was the year where we had a large deficit. And in that year, there were other surpluses to be able to offset that. So there was no need for the use of this reserve. This year, as I've reported all throughout the year in the general fund, we had a number of things that worked against us. In addition to the health insurance with the sales tax and other things, and so we don't have other deficits or surpluses to offset it. So we're requesting to draw this 500,000 down for use to be, to lapse into the general fund to offset that. The other point I make on this health insurance reserve is that the rating agencies consider that basically the same as our unassigned general fund balance. So they add those two together in order to see where we fall in our percentage. So even with the use of this 500,000, leaving $1 million, it would still, as I'll go through in a little more detail, will still be over 30%, which is where we want to be.
So Barney, you made a comment that, well, with the sales tax revenue and other things, we didn't have surpluses that we've had in the past. And this is the second largest deficit we've ever had since 2012. So what does that look like going forward?
So one of the things that really drove this deficit this year was a spike in our prescription costs. And as I've reported in other general fund reports, we've taken steps as part of the 2025 budget to do some programmatic changes in which those costs will, and we've already seen in the first 3 months, a material reduction in those costs. They have to do with the use of biosimilar drugs, which are used as an alternative to the high cost specialty drugs, the ones that you see on TV with the commercials that cost a lot to offset their advertising and otherwise marketing. And then the other one was having to do with GLP-1s. That's right. Thank you. That has to do with the weight loss reduction drugs. Those are not covered, and as a result of that, that will bring that cost down as well.
Patty?
If I could clarify the change for the GLP-1s, if there is a health condition that requires that medication, it is allowed. If the sole purpose is for weight loss, it is not.
Good point. Okay. So going on to the next 3 whereases, this has to do with an allocation that's done. Human Resource Division personnel appropriation. So this was started when Human Resources was reorganized with a business partner. I guess infrastructure and various departments in the county, Human Services, Public Works, at that time Brookside, and then the Sheriff's Department were allocated a portion of those costs to offset that, so that they could use those to draw down on other type of funding. From the year 2022 to 2024, that budget allocation was suspended due to the Brookside struggling with COVID and overall deficits. With the change and a turnaround in fortune at Brookside, that allocation was reinstated in 2025, and the administration's requesting that we retroactively apply this to 2024, and that will be a savings to the general fund of $130,000. Continuing on page 2, it's the last 3 whereases and the top whereas on page 3. This has to do with the Land Information Department. So last year, we reclassified one of the real property lister positions that were vacated. This year, another real property lister position was vacated from the standpoint of one of the staff was tapped to be the deputy register of deeds. So that created a vacancy. So along those lines, they wanted to have this position reclassed. So the preference of land information is to take these real property lister positions, and there's a GI analyst, is to kind of do a hybrid position. It's better for the use of their department, and it's easier to recruit people that have those two skill sets. So this request is to take this recently vacated position about 2 months ago, and to have it reclassified. This is levy neutral as a result of the vacancy that was created, because of vacancy. And then the last piece of this would be to kind of close the loop on this last one. There's currently the GIS analyst position. That's a NE10 position that's currently filled with an employee. So this is a request that in the future, when that position is vacated through attrition, then we would be able to reclassify that to the NE11 as well. I know there was a question, I don't know if you want, I can address it directly. So there was a question on what additional cost we would have in the 2026 budget going forward with these reclassifications. So the pay range is for any 9 goes between $25 to $32. For any 11, it's $29 to $37 basically. So the position that was vacated, the hourly wage for that person was at $30.61. So if this position is filled at the bottom of the range at $29, there would be actually a potential savings in the 2026 budget. But as long as it potentially, the intent is to fill it at the bottom of that range, so there should be savings. I should qualify with that. Similar with the GIS analyst position, with that current employee that's in that position, the pay range for NE10 is 27 to 34. The NE11 again is 29 to 37. The incumbent there currently makes over $32. So when and if that position is vacated, if the intent is to fill that position at the bottom of the range of NE11, that also would create a budgetary savings.
Supervisor Morrissey, did you have any, you okay with that?
Yep.
Okay, all right.
So on page 3, the second and third whereas has to do with a proposed reorganization of Division of Public Health staff. So the request here is to eliminate a population health manager position, which is at pay grade E11, and to create a position of Deputy Director of Division of Public Health. That's at pay grade E13. In addition to that, the request is to reclassify a public health supervisor position to a community outreach and grant specialist position. Those are both pay grade E10. These two changes for 2025 would be levy neutral as a result of vacancies. To address the similar question having to do with what the effect potentially would be for 2026 budget. So it is dependent on at the level of what the new position will be filled in with. So potentially it could be a minimal cost increase of just over $100. If they're placed at the bottom of the range. If they're placed into the midpoint of the range, it would be an $18,285 additional cost. Now that's assuming that it would be at family insurance. If this individual comes in and is at a single coverage, that would save 14,000 to offset whatever potential increase in the salary would be. And if they came in and they took no county insurance, then the savings would be actually end up being more than what the potential increase in costs will be. And as I said, there's no cost related to the reclassing of the two same pay grade positions.
Supervisor Morrissey.
So just so I understand on your, it's levy neutral, not to this department, levy neutral, so the county budget as a whole.
Levy neutral to this department. I believe,
How
is
can
that,
that be?
is that position vacant?
Oh, all right. I didn't say anything, said it was vacant.
The public health supervisor is a vacant position. That was not as clear in the wording as
Okay,
it was.
if it was vacant, I understand where the
Yep.
savings is.
Yep.
So I don't have an issue with the funding. I do not think we should be, unless these were previously agreed upon things, be changing job titles and classifications mid-year in 2025. So, but again, I don't think that's what we should be doing. These, my opinion, should be part of the 2026 budget allocation, that they want to change the titles and job duties. But again, I understand now if this is vacant, why it's levy neutral. But again, I don't think it's a good policy where we should be doing that again, unless there was some previous agreement that this was going to happen based on the.
Okay. And just so you know, there are things within departments where they find a need as certain things come up that we're not always privy to, that, cause them to maybe want to restructure a little bit. So typically, we try to make them all be done at budget time, but occasionally some slip through where in light of making the department or the division run more efficiently, they bring it forward. So I understand what you're saying and I appreciate your comments. So, thank you. Continue, Barna, please.
Sure, on page 3, let's see. Fourth, whereas, so this has to do with basically some accounting housekeeping, budgetary overdraft overall within the law enforcement appropriation unit. The corresponding budget modification would be on page 22. Just 22, not 2022. So you can see the budget mod there is for 22,351,220. It's a one-sided budget modification that's required as part of our closing. If there are no other questions, I'll go to our general fund report updated. This is the year-end summary.
I did have a question, but
Go ahead, Supervisor Morrissey.
Kirsten had his hand up first.
No, we can let Supervisor Morrissey go, but that's okay with you. You're the chair.
You can go.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this $1,000 amount, the policy change that we approved, was that seen as being just prospective, not retrospective? So on here, the language says it's $1,000 and the new policy eliminates that 1,000. That, in next year's resolution, you won't be doing that anymore.
Yes.
But that was only seen as being prospective.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So next year, the language will be changed.
Yes.
Comply with the new book rules. Yes.
And that answers my question.
Thank you.
Supervisor Morrissey.
My question was on page 22. That's where you just addressed, right, the sheriff?
Yes.
So if I'm reading this correctly, the sheriff's overtime budget for patrol is over budget by about 1.1 million.
Yeah. Let's see, revised budget. Yes.
Pre-trial is over budget by $1,048,000.
No.
Well, actually,
Right.
I take that back. It's about patrol is 900,000. So it would be the difference between the 925,000 and now the balance that remains at 64,000. So it'd be 880,000 prior to a budget modification. And for pretrial, the deficit was so it'd be the 185 plus the 536, so that'd be 720,000-ish. Based on the allocation.
And this is just the overtime allocation, not any other kind of allocation, right?
Right.
It seems to me significant numbers of where the accountability is for this. My last question is on these, if this overtime is created because of staffing issues, is the salary wages already figured into this?
Yeah, the vacancies and the wages, that's,
stuff.
this is net of that,
This is the net of that.
correct? This 2,340,000 is taking everything into account, actually in the entire law enforcement umbrella, so it actually takes into account circuit court, district attorney, using all those different budgets, putting it all together and overall. We're applying this to the sheriff's department because that's where the overall deficits are. The material.
Okay, just give me the final bottom number and what the deficit is. The
Sure.
2 million on the bottom of that, or?
Well, when I go, I get on the general fund report on page 7, I was just gonna get to.
Perfect.
But you did hit on something that really bothers me too, the overtime, and we're gonna look in this budgeting cycle to try to bring those numbers closer together, because in the past, the sheriff's department has had a vacancy pool and ICE inmates and various inmates to offset some of the other, costs, and we're not having those. So we have to look to budget a little more actual than we are. So it's a concern of mine as well. So we will be looking at it. Please continue, Barna.
Sure. So looking at the bottom line of the general fund report here, we're showing that we're reporting just a small deficit, a brighter picture than what we were projecting from last month. So I'll go through the material changes that occurred from last month's meeting to this month. So human services operating surplus between amounts that they were able to draw down more from grants as a result of the health insurance deficit that was charged back to the different departments, and other revenues that they were able to draw down that increased. Their surplus increased by over 700,000. We already discussed the reduction of the non-current liability for Brookside in the box there. And I think the only other, and the vacancy surplus flipped from a deficit to a surplus as a result of if the allocation for HR is approved for Brookside, that will flip that from 110 deficit to a 25 surplus. On the lower part of on the items decreasing the general fund, to speak to Supervisor Morrissey's, the total for the sheriff's department deficit, it was a 3.85 million deficit on the expense side and just over $1 million on the revenue side. The major culprits on that, and I've reported these in other meetings, but obviously you're not a member, committee member. So the major culprits on that would be overtime. That was about over 2 million of that. We had deficits in inmate medical services. We had deficits in inmate prescription costs. I think those, and on the revenue side, we had deficits in the inmate, U.S. Marshals revenue. That was the most material one there. So between those two, they added up to a little over $4 million to answer your question. Also on the negative side of the ledger, our sales tax revenue deficit settled in at a little over 900,000. Register of deeds stayed the same from what my projection was from last month. Everything else was the same, and the miscellaneous improved a little bit from 300,000 deficit to 133. So bottom line, we're looking at just a small reduction in overall unassigned general fund. The unassigned reserves percentage is in the same ballpark of what we were projecting. It's at 29.53, and as I noted before, if you add that $1 million health insurance reserve that we have, that would put us over 31. I believe it's 31 and a half, 31%. So that's,
I look at this and thank goodness we have a human services department.
yeah, their deficits are surplus certainly very today.
And Brookside.
Yep. So with that, I already covered page
Hold on,
8.
Supervisor Marcy,
Just had one general question.
go ahead.
What was the surplus from Brookside for 2024? I know you've taken this, do you know what the total was?
We will. Oh, sorry.
I was just looking at that today with the director and it was just a little bit over 3 million. Now that's unaudited. It was almost 3.1 million. But it's not unaudited. But I think internally all the entries have been made.
I don't know that all of these entries have been made. So
These have,
5,000, correct.
but all of the known entries
Correct.
that,
Yep.
yeah.
Guess I would just say the same thing as Chairman Getz did, thank God for Brookside.
Yeah, overall, considering some of the challenges we had, we're still ending up in the with a good solid all fiscal year. We'll be reporting that to our rating agencies. So continuing on to page 9. So these 9 and 10. So these are the specific carryovers that require additional approval. Page 9, these are the ones that just require finance committee approval. Because for 2 reasons, either they're under $1,000, or it has to do with repurposing capital, which the finance committee can do on its own. So I'll go through and kind of go through these one by one. There's some smaller dollar amounts in registered deeds and human resources, having to do with some new personnel. In parks, they're carrying over some salaries for temporaries to help them with this year's temporary salaries. There's machinery and equipment, 20,000, and building maintenance supplies that they're seeing requesting this carryover to help them with 2025's budget. And facilities also, building supplies account for 25,000. At Brookside, sprinkler system budget improvements carrying over 13,000 there. In the facilities capital, so this has to do with leftover, I should say surplus in various projects, the Civic Center Innovation Project, Civic Center Elevator, HVAC infrared heaters and floor sweeper. These are surplus funds from those projects, and those are being requested to put in the building improvements in the facilities for a total of 125,000. So Chris can speak to this. The thought here is that there are elevators and large mechanicals that can go unexpectedly and are large dollar ones. So this would go towards that. We had, I believe in the safety building, we had a elevator that went home.
Yeah, so in this year's CIP, there was money specifically for an elevator at KSP. We actually have an elevator at KCC that went out. So this was repurposing money from the Civic Center renovation fund to a brand new project of fixing an elevator at KCC. What Barn is kind of alluding to is in the upcoming budget. That fund, the major equipment fund, so it would encompass things like elevators and feed.
Our elevators need to work. I'm with you on that.
Yes, yeah.
That would be the worst thing, to be stuck in an elevator, so.
Going on to the next section in the highways. These are having to do with other operating supplies, fuel and utilities, carrying those amounts over to help with 2025 budget. And the last section is highway capital. These are capital machinery projects. These are surplus balances in those for cold cleaner, aerial platform lift and air compressor and concrete bucket. So a total of those would total 46,000, and the request is to carry those over and repurpose those toward motorized vehicles. With the current environment with potentially vehicle costs going up, the thought there would be to repurpose it towards that.
Supervisor Gearston.
Mr. Chairman, through the chair to the budget director, does that complete your report on page 9?
Yes.
And the total is 385,064.
Correct.
I would move approval. This is just finance committee, correct? I would move approval of the carryovers on page 9.
It's been moved by Supervisor Gearston, seconded by Supervisor Gama. Any questions or comments on those? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? I heard you.
So switching over to page 10, these are the ones that require county board approval. We're starting at the top under finance. We're requesting carryover of staff development, 3,000 to go towards some additional training for the new payroll system. Requesting a carryover of 3,000 of staff development to go into data processing costs. To fund some Copilot licenses from Microsoft. We're carrying over the balance of the Jensen Hughes study of 9,800, excuse me. And then there's 2,000 left over in a furniture fixture fund account that we're proposing to carry over for 2025's budget.
What are those chairs for? Just for county boardroom?
No.
All right.
The second floor.
Nice try. I don't know that would get me there either.
It wouldn't, but I just have to mention it, just so it stays on everybody's radar.
Next section, human resources, staff development carrying over. Having to do with the new employee, additional staff development of 2,500. Carrying over unemployment compensation. So during COVID, we were able to generate a large credit having to do with fraudulent type unemployment compensation. So we worked our way through that large credit. So we're requesting to carry over this 4,000 assist with 2025 budget. Employee recruitment carryover of 3,000 having to do with some additional deputies that are coming on board in 2025 to assist with that. And under other professional services, 22,500 to assist with the class and compensation study. I think that was that it for the market refresh? I keep going. Market refresh. The next one also has to do with
Employment recruitment with the sheriff's department. Clara, can you enlighten me on that?
That's actually under civil service.
Oh, so.
Yeah, employment recruitment, so the 3,000, we've been updating some things
Oh, yeah.
for like the new logo and that, and replacing things of our materials for fairs and things.
Got excited because we were gonna do something different with the sheriff's department for recruiting. And then,
But the
Yeah.
next,
all right,
the next one.
First for sheriff's department.
I know, we talk about it almost monthly here on how we can work on that overtime and stuff, but I heard it and I wondered what that was, so. Continue, Barney.
Sure. Under civil services, the fitness for duty exams, that's the carryover of 5,000 to go towards those additional recruitments for this year. Under the county executive, there's a proposal to carry over 10,000 for other professional services. And to repurpose other professional services of 5,000 and carrying over printing and duplication, amount of 1,587 to go towards courtroom 100th anniversary recognition. Having to do with, for this year in 2025.
What's the 15,000 for in other professional services?
That
with
is
the
also for
executive?
the 100th anniversary of the.
What does she need $15,000 for that for?
I think that there might be some outreach that might be done or something like that.
Next one is land information, printing and duplication having to do with the cost of water ink going up. So they're requesting carrying over $1,271 there. Juvenile intake, juvenile housing, we had a surplus of 263,000. So we're requesting to carry that over. That'll help with, at some point, we'll have to start paying the higher fees related to the juvenile facility in Racine. So this will help with that, adding that to the 2025 budget. And Brookside has a balance of 5,000 for vital machines that they're requesting carrying over. So the grand total is 345,000 in total of these that I've noted here.
This goes to the full board.
Yeah, it goes to the full board to requiring the full board.
And is this incorporated by, sorry, Mr. Chair, that through.
Yeah, well, I didn't know what work you were doing.
Sorry.
Okay, Supervisor Gearsman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this goes to the full board and it's incorporated by reference in the resolution.
Correct. It is.
So when we adopt the resolution, we're approving item 7.
That's correct.
So that answers.
Yeah, so we don't need to move it now. Yeah, it'll all be moved together.
Right.
Yeah. Let's see, page 11 was the budget mod we've already talked about. 12 was the budget mod that we already talked about. Page 13, so this is the one-page write-up having to do with the land information reclassification. That shows kind of the eventual changing of the positions. Following pages have to do with the detail having to do with the job descriptions related to the health, the reorganization of the health positions. All that detail is there. And that was the budget overdraft that we had already discussed on page 22. Page 23 is the lapsing sheet. With that, I'll call up our
So on page 23, the last.
Hold on. Let's, go ahead, Patty.
Could you introduce
Oh,
yourself?
I'm sorry.
please? So many on the committee have not met you before.
I'm Maureen Peterson. I work for Andrea Norendorf. I help with preparation of the audit. And
No, Erica Bloomberg, I'm a partner at A&O, and I work with Maureen in preparing the financial statements, and working through the audit at year end.
Okay, please continue.
Okay. So the lapsing sheet, this shows, the departments that lapse their surplus into the general fund. You've got human services, health department and highway, the three of those, any surplus that they have, they lapse into the general fund. As you can see here, human services had, 4.9 million in surplus. Health department had 371,000. And highway operations had 268,000 that they're lapsing in. The other two columns show, just for informational purposes, these two funds, they hold on to their balance. That's the Job Center and Golf. So this ties in with Barna's general fund report. It starts off with the 20.6 unassigned general fund before the lapsing. And then we're lapsing in 5.5 million, so that brings up our unassigned general fund balance to 26 million. So this ties in with, and then you see the same percentages below that Barney had. And then on page 24, go to the balance sheet for the governmental funds. There's the section here that's boxed off that just shows all of the different items that get pulled out of the fund balance to leave the unassigned. Some things that we highlighted already. Barna talked about the we're reducing the amount that we pull out for the advance due from Brookside, which brings us down to the 1.5 million. We pull out delinquent taxes, which has gone down this year. That was also illustrated on the general fund report. And then we just, at the bottom here, we have some assigned items, encumbrances, which are purchase orders basically and contracts. The DARE program gets pulled out. This 1.198 million, that's items that are being carried over into the 2025 budget. And then this 967,000 that's listed as capital projects, that's the PCB settlement that sits in there. So that brings us down to the 20.6 million for now. And then right next to it, you see what human services is going to be lapsing in. On page 25 is the income statement for the governmental funds. If you see down this section down here, we're showing the fund balance before lapsing. You see the 6.4 deficit with the general fund, and human services has a 4.9 surplus. Page 26 shows the general fund budget. And as Barna highlighted, this shows that the general fund is over budget. This 2.3 million in public safety, that's going to be taken care of with the budget resolution. And then the revenues, sales tax was under budget a little bit. And then you've got the 2.7 million that was highlighted in the general fund report. And then also there's a 1.19 that it was budgeted to be pulled out of reserves. That shows you the general fund budget. And then page 27 is the human services budget. And they are under budget this year. They had a lot of Medicaid revenue that came in and lower placements. So they had 4.8 under budget. So I'm going to take over with the
So Maureen just pointed out the major funds for the county, the ones that are the most significant, general fund always, and then human services. Starting on page 28, we have the balance sheet for what are called the non-major funds, just lesser activity, lesser dollar amounts that run through here. A couple of things to point out, some newer type funds. You see the opioid settlement fund, we're sitting on about $4.7 million at the end of the year. And if you look on page 29, we'll see the income from that. We got another 2.7 in this year. We're expecting more to come in through 2028, up to about 17 million in total. So to date, we've received about 5 million of that. spent a little bit of it, but not too much. Health Department Fund, Maureen, touched on that. We'll lapse the $371,000 surplus fund balance into the general fund. We also have the Human Services Building Grant Fund. So this is covering the actual project costs of the Human Services Building. There's $4.5 million there of grant funds that have been drawn but not yet spent. And then the ARPA fund balance, we've spent most of that down to 500,000. The rules on the ARPA money was it had to be spent or committed by the end of 2024. So the rest of that 500,000 is committed in 25. It'll be, that fund will be done and closed out after next year. Moving on to page 29, as I said, this is the income statement for those non-major funds. You can see the 2.7 million coming in on the opioid fund. The interest on that is also restricted, set aside. So those funds earned about 178,000 for the year. And then for the grant funds, we pulled out another 5.8, drew 5.8 million in the grant funds, spent 4.5 during the year on that project. And then we used just over 3 million of the ARPA funding in 2024. Page 30, we have some more non-major funds. These are the capital projects funds. So it's exactly what it sounds like. This is where all the different capital projects are being paid from. Basically, what we see is at the end of the fiscal year, all the funds held in those projects are assigned for the planned projects. The bonding and all of that's already been drawn for projects that are ongoing or planned for 2025. And then page 31 is the income statement for those. Just showing mostly that that's money coming in from bonding and it's being spent or distributed out to the other funds for capital projects. On page 32, we have the proprietary funds, and this is a totally different type of fund. We've been talking a lot about the Brookside, the highway, the golf course. These are called proprietary funds because they are to operate more like a business than a government. The intent is that they're funded by the fees and charges. You know, they're self-sustaining funds versus being supported by tax dollars. And so that's always the goal for those funds. Highway is a bit of a hybrid. It's a little bit tax, a little bit fees and charges. Some governments report it as governmental. The county it's largely funded by grants and fees and charges. So highway is reported here. So these financial statements look different. They are reported more similar to a business operation. So you have the whole gamut of the balance sheet, the assets, fixed asset, long-term debt, all showing up on here. So it's a little bit more difficult to see the fund balances and the reserves and things the way you see it in the governmental funds, but it is all here. So starting with Brookside, the top line there on page 32, the negative cash for Brookside, it's a negative 2.88 million. This is the current liability due to the general fund. That was 4.9 million at the end of last year. It's now 2.8, so we're getting less negative over time. So that surplus is reducing that liability there. And then if we move down almost to the bottom of page 32 is where you see the long-term portion of that liability, which has been reduced down to the 1.5 million after the $788,000 transfer we discussed. And then the balance sheet carries over onto page 33. So I'll point out the net position of the business type funds. You see that Brookside, the total net position, $1.8 million. What's not reflected in here yet is the depreciation entry, which is roughly 800,000 to about $1 million. So that will reduce further. We do still expect it to be a positive net position, which is an improvement. It was a negative 6.8 million at the end of last year, so. Although it's a small fund balance, it is getting, larger.
In the black.
In the black.
We're very excited.
Yes.
Yeah,
Linda's back there.
That's an understatement.
Yeah,
yeah, it's great.
and the $455,000 sort of carryover, that was discussed earlier is in here, but as I said, the fund balance split out is shown differently on these statements, so you don't see it spelled out as clearly, but it's, coming out of that surplus, for next year. Page 34 is where you see the incomes and the expenses for these funds. And this is where you'll see down towards the bottom, the change in that position. Right now sitting at the 4.2 million for Brookside. Supervisor Gibson pointed out 3.1 million earlier. Once we take into account the depreciation, that's where it'll end up at, there.
Patty?
If I could just take a second, one of your requests was to kind of explain the differences with the proprietary funds, which Erica has done. I also wanted to just give a little history. I'm gonna start with golf. Golf was not self-sufficient until after 2011. 2011 was the last year with a deficit. After 2011, they have had surpluses moving forward. During that period of time from 2012 to 2019, the county was still subsidizing them by funding their capital. However, in 2020, they began to pay for their own capital as well. And that includes a large multi-million-dollar golf course improvement project that was improved over several years, which is currently ongoing, but they are still showing a profit. Brookside is now showing a profit, and the projections on 25 look even better than 24. So we're very excited about that as well, and hope that continues. And as that becomes more stable, we will also look at them funding their own capital. Now, I need to clarify, they are funding the debt service on the building remodel from 2018. So that does come out. I believe the principal on that is about $1 million and interest is about $600,000 per year. And that is, it will be going down in the next few years, but that will not be paid off until 2035. But the surplus that you see is over and above the debt service rate.
So the only thing we have out there is that from
There's-
2018.
There is still a short-term owed to us as well, that negative cash line that Erica spoke about. That's the short-term portion.
Where's that? How much is that?
And
2.8? Was that the one that we were talking about from the
32.
2018, or is this in addition to that?
that's a short-term portion of, so the proprietary funds are independent, self-sustaining, hopefully. But the county works through one central checking account. So all the bills go through the same place, and at the end of the year, we allocate out whose cash is whose. We've tracked it through the system. Our accounting system keeps all that separate. And we do transfers back and forth. At the end of not good years, which were several, the county had paid bills for Brookside that they didn't have the cash for, which generated the negative cash. You can't have negative cash on your financial statements. That becomes a due to other funds because the transfer comes from other funds. In 2018, that hit the project for the remodel was complete and the auditor said, all right, now we have to start to talk about, is all of this going to be paid back in a year? No, not all of it would be paid back in a year. The intent was that the short term would be paid back in a year and the pandemic hit. So then they were, with the help of some ARPA funds, break even, and now have turned it around and are working in the right direction.
So out of all of of these funds, we have a short-term thing with Brookside and we have a long-term.
Correct.
The short-term is how much?
2.886.
And the long-term is how much?
With the passage of this, it will be 1.5.
The reason I asked you to talk about these is because I don't ever want to get so close that we're having to go back to that. you know, by taking the money and how we funnel the money away, I want to make sure that they can continue to be self-sustaining. So that's in my mind. I don't know. I sell furniture. I don't do this. So I would just want to make sure that in my simple mind, that's what we're doing. We're not raiding these proprietary funds to get them down so low that they can't continue to pay for themselves. So that's why I wanted everybody to understand how that works and how the money flows and what we're taking and what we're not taking and that type of thing. So.
If I could clarify one thing, we're not raiding the fund.
Okay.
We don't want to bring.
Repaying what we had given them, okay, I mean, you know, like I said,
Them to be self-sufficient, they're heading that direction, golf is there, we're very.
I understand that. I used to have many a debate about golf, you know, on the floor when they weren't self-sufficient. So, you know, I love to see all these numbers, but, you know, I want to make sure that while they're repaying us,
Yes.
that we're keeping the amount of money there that we need to do to continue to function. That's keep
Yeah.
them afloat. Okay. That's why I wanted to have you give that little report. Please continue. Thank you.
All right. So then,
Oh, you have a question?
I do.
Okay.
I
Supervisor
figured I
Kirby.
could wait if we needed to. So just as a curiosity, why are we reporting a negative asset?
We won't.
Oh, so that will move. Okay, yeah,
Yes.
that was,
These are draft unaudited preliminary statements. When we record the depreciation, we will also do the transfers, which will then move
Right.
that negative cash into the other funds.
thank you.
That's what you're.
Please continue.
so then the last couple of statements on, starting on page 35, these are sort of like proprietary funds. They're called internal service funds. They're self-sustaining sort of, but they serve other departments and divisions within the county instead of the external public. So in here we have the Human Services Building Fund, the Health Insurance Reserve Fund, which Barna was talking about earlier, and then Workers' Comp and General Liability Insurance Funds. So we're aggregating premiums here, allocating the costs out to the different departments. And workers' comp and general liability insurance don't keep a fund balance, it's just in and out. The health insurance, you'll see at the bottom of page 35, this is what it will look like if the use of the 500,000 with this packet is approved, it'll end up at $1 million. And then the human services building fund, that reserve has been built up over years, we're using some of that for the new building. That total balance hasn't changed much from year to year, from last year to this year. Some of that has been used for the engineering and permitting type costs and the non-capital type costs. So that fund balance is sitting at $7 million. Of that, the 4.3 is sort of unrestricted. But really the 2.8 million that Maureen pointed out is what's available for applying to the new building. And then page 36 is just the income and expense for those funds. So human services building, again, pretty break even on the year. Health insurance reserve using the 500,000 to get us down to the $1 million.
Thank you. Very good, clear, concise report. Any questions or comments from the case? Supervisor Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair to Erica. So I remember the treasurer received an unexpected check of almost $1 million. Is that what you were referring to on page 24 under the assigned? That 967? Is that something different than that?
Patty's nodding her head, yes.
That is. So when we got that check, was that check obligated for a purpose, or was that just us worried that it was obligated?
The concern was, and we had many conversations with the auditors on this, Barna wanted it to go into the unassigned general fund. They kept saying there were no strings attached, but yet in reading over the documentation, there was a real sense that there were no strings attached, but the intent was that it would be used for projects that met that definition. The settlement funds came from PCBs out in California. We did not have to use it for PCBs. We hadn't identified anything here, but we are using them for remediation type projects. So of that 967,000, there was a resolution that came through last year that approximately 400 to 450,000 would be used towards some projects that had been identified. One of them is the Hillside Hardware Building. We're working in conjunction with the city on things, but our side of the ledger for funding that was coming from those Monsanto funds. There are a couple other properties that may need some remediation or have some concerns, and those were also identified. The remaining $500,000 is sitting there and for potential uses in the future.
So is there a more intense look we can do on this? I mean, we can still allocate the funds for remediation, but is this court counsel's opinion that
It's not, it is our auditor's opinion.
and doesn't our court counsel's legal opinion weigh into what our auditors?
Our court counsel's opinion was we needed to use it for the purposes identified, the types of things that it was not, but they did not weigh in as to what the presentation of the financials.
But they wouldn't do that. Just seems like we could eyeball this again for the next year and see if we can free it up for the general fund to help protect their bond rating. That's
We can have further conversations, but our auditors had dealt with other counties who had received the funds and other situations where the treatment was pretty specific, that it was, I'm going to say it wrong, it was assigned initially, and once that resolution was passed, that component became committed, but it still was not unassigned.
the board could adopt a different resolution if it would help us. It just, it'd be interesting to know, to talk to GFOA or other organizations and then see what other counties and other states are doing. So that's not a small chunk of change. That would help move that to the general fund, and then if we want to, we can allocate it somebody for Hillside Hardware and that kind of thing. So that answers my question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Fine, anything else?
Nope.
Bobby, anything else?
No, I'm done.
Supervisor Gearston.
Mr. Chairman, I would move approval of the resolution.
Supervisor Gearston moves approval of the resolution
As amended.
as amended. Don't worry, I won't let him forget it. Seconded by Supervisor Gama. Any other questions or concerns, comments, anybody? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you for all your work on this.
I didn't put the.
It's a nice concise presentation.
Yeah, you guys did a really good job.
It's a team effort. and
Yes.
They do a very good job.
All right. Audit of bills. Is that where we're at? Everybody sign the audit of bills?
I think we got it.
Yes.
And we have a 3-hour 2024 year-end report.
I think we missed that, Dave. You're certainly welcome to stay. Continuing on with Department of Administration, Clara has a HR report for us.
Good evening, committee members, and governance. Clara Tappa, Director of Human Resources. This is reporting only to the Finance and Administration Committee. We have reclassified a position, our Belonging and Inclusion Coordinator role.
The incumbent in that role vacated the position, took a position outside of the county, March 21st. And we are going to be filling it as a human resources business partner position. This is in the same pay grade, so there's no, nothing further other than reporting to finance committee that we're reclassifying the role.
And it's my understanding that she was doing a lot of what this new position will do while she was there. So it's more or less just lining up with what we were doing. Okay,
Yes,
Okay.
much alignment.
okay. Supervisor Gaske.
So as a business partner, which department would this individual be assigned to?
So we are going to assign some of the smaller work groups to this business partner. One of the primary duties that we'll have them be working on is the payroll and HR system implementation. We're expected to go live on 1/1/26. The belonging and inclusion coordinator had a significant role in that, so we're looking for this position to take that up, and then once implemented, be kind of a super user in that system and assist with training. But it's going to have a systems and data management focus to this position. So because of that systems focus initially, we're going to have them working from an HR generalist perspective with some of the smaller groups. So that'll include our elected officials office, IT, land information, and juvenile intake, court counsel.
And then where will their office be located?
So they'll have an office here at KCAP because those are really kind of downtown campus.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that report? Seeing none, thank you. Appreciate it. Anything else? Seeing none, it's been moved by Supervisor Kirby, seconded by Supervisor Deerston to adjourn. All those in favor?
I,